welcome back. Today we're going to work on the 7.3 Superduty again, and what we're going to do today is service the transmission. The transmission on this is a 4R100, and it's the second one because the first one lost second gear at about 40,000 miles. I'm about 143,000 miles right now, and it's time for its 15,000 mile transmission service. Every 15,000 I change the fluid and the Magnefine filter, and sometimes every other service I pull the pan and I change the inside the pan filter, but there's never anything in that. I highly question if that's even necessary. The Magnefine has a primary magnet filtration in it, and that's what I'm really concerned with. I basically just pull the pan every other time to clean the magnets that are in there. So without further ado, we'll get going on this transmission service, and I'm going to show you the way that I do it, the way that you can get all the transmission fluid out and start fresh. So on this truck I have the Derail Performance Products pan on it, on this trans. And this pan has these air passages through it. And these air passages have tubes on the inside, and the air flows, the cooler air flows through the bottom of the transmission pan, and helps cool the transmission fluid. And I'll tell you, it works really well. I've used this pan now for almost 15,000 miles under heavy towing conditions, and my trans runs at least 20 degrees, maybe more, cooler than it used to before. So I'll put a link in the description for this pan. I can't recommend it highly enough. So in this service I'm not pulling the pan because I did it last time, and I only do it every other time to clean the magnets and change the paper filter in there. And that paper filter never has any debris in it. So on the Derail pan, at any rate, it's a 9/16 for the drain plug here. The other nice thing about this pan, it has a couple of different bungs in it if you want to put in an analog transmission temperature gauge. So the first step is to drain down the pan. And the plug also has a magnet, but there's a magnet. I transferred the magnet from the stock pan that's around the drain hole in the stock pan to this pan, and I also added another magnet. So and then I have Magnefine filtration on this transmission, which we're going to take apart next. So here we are, we're draining her down, and you should get about 6 to 7 quarts. I'll probably get more because this pan has holds 7 additional quarts in it. The idea being that the more transmission fluid you have, the more cooler it's going to run. So we're just going to drain that down. Our bucket's filling up, and as soon as that's drained down, we'll shove the plug back in. It's the one recommended for my truck at any rate. And what this is essentially is a plastic housing, and inside of this plastic housing there is a pretty powerful magnet, and there's a flow arrow marked on it, so you got to make sure you get the flow going in the right direction. And this installs in the coming from the cooler back to the transmission, so the return line. So as the oil goes through the transmission, torque converter and all of that, goes up to the trans cooler up front, which mine is a 6.0 Ford 6.0 transmission cooler, 31 row. I replaced that when I knew I was going to be doing some heavy towing, and so I put the 6.0 cooler in, and that's available. The best price I found on it is Towsley Ford in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, and it's about 3 times the size of the stock cooler for the 7.3. So the 6.0 Ford truck is the one you want to get. The cooler, you can buy it brand new. It fits in the same holes, no modifications. I believe that there is a fitting or two that you have to change. I can't recall. I did it a few years back, but it's a really big cooler compared to the one that comes on the truck. And then so when the transmission fluid exits the 6.0 cooler and heads back to the transmission, that's where you put this filter. So I'm going to take that filter out the way I have it mounted right now, and there's a multitude of ways you could do it. But I'll take my old one out and I'm going to replace it with this brand new one. I do that every 15,000 miles. Okay, so what you're looking at here is this line right here is the line that comes from the transmission cooler that's in the lower tank of the radiator, and this line leads out towards the transmission cooler that's in the stack, in the radiator stack out front. The 6.0 cooler, the bigger one that I put in a few years back. This line goes from this outer line right here. This outer line comes out of the transmission cooler that's in the lower tank of the radiator and goes out to the air exchanger out on the front of the stack, the actual trans cooler that's on the cooling stack out front near the radiator. And then that line comes back via this line right here, and that line returns to the transmission. And this is the line that we're going to pump our, right here where it comes out of the trans cooler. That's the line that we're going to pump our fluid out of. This line here that's going to the cooler from the transmission, or from the radiator, this line right here is the one that gets the Magnefine installed. So if you look up here, you can see the Magnefine is right here. I got my left hand on it. So I'm going to take this clamp apart right here. Loosen this clamp. I'll probably change this clamp out too. It doesn't seem to be a standard size. I didn't really cover this in the video because it's really tight to work right in here with the camera. But the other problem is this isn't stock on this truck. If you have a Magnefine, you probably put it on and you probably know how to get it off and change it. So you probably don't need to cover it because it's probably not the way mine is mounted, though it may be similar, it may not be the same. So anyway, I've got the Magnefine changed. My neighbor's mowing her lawn right now, and it's making all kinds of racket. So we'll proceed here as best we can, but Magnefine is done. And then I cleaned all this really well, so there's no drips. So if it's going to leak at all, which I don't think it's going to, it's just hose clamps and line. I don't believe it's going to leak at all, but if it does, I'll be able to tell it. So you guys want to clean up behind your work so that you don't fake yourself out thinking you got a leak. Pan out of my extra capacity pan holds 7 quarts more than the stock pan, and so you got to pour this out because you're going to need this bucket. So we're going to pour it into our waste oil bucket here. We got our waste oil jugs all standing by there, and we're going to pour off into them. Very carefully. Okay, the next step of this is we need to undo this clamp, and then we need to remove this hose. That's going to leak, so you want to have your drip pan ready. And then we're going to hook our plastic tubing, clear plastic tubing, up to this hose here that comes direct from the transmission cooler up by the front of the radiator. So that's the next step. We're going to use this clamp to secure the plastic hose. Almost got it. Okay. No matter how hard you try, you still hit the driveway. You still hit the camera. That's just the way it is. Okay. So next you take your plastic hose right here. I'm not entirely sure the diameter of the hose, and your truck may be different or will be different because I put all these fittings in to do this task. And your truck will probably not be set up like this. So, but you can set it up like this. If you want to do this procedure, you'll have to. Okay, so you see what we got here. From the transmission cooler, that goes to the return line, this line, goes to that lower steel line that runs along the transmission, runs into the back behind the transmission pan. We've disconnected that. We're hooked into the cooler, and then we've got this plastic hose. You can see it's filling up with transmission fluid as we speak. That plastic hose is going to run out to the bucket by the driver's door. The reason we're by the driver's door is we need to be able to watch what's going on in this bucket when we start pumping out. But before we pump anything out, what we got to do next is we have to add clean fluid to the trans. So 6 quarts of clean fluid go into the trans. So we're adding 6 quarts of fresh transmission fluid to the pan. So what we're going to do here, this is all going to be behind the rest of the old stuff that's left. So this is in the pan, and what we're going to do is start the engine and shift through the gears, and then we're going to be pumping out the torque converter and the valve body and the transmission coolers. All of that will be pumped out into our catch bucket. and the fresh fluid will follow on behind. Drained the pan first, then I changed the Magnefine, which you may or may not have. Then we hooked up to the transmission return line with our clear hose and our bucket, and now we're going to start the truck and pump out, and we're going to pump until we see bubbles come. That means that the fluid, the 6 quarts I just put in the pan, are now downstream towards the torque converter, so, and the pan would be dry. So we're just going to start the truck and watch the hose. There it goes, it's starting to pump. There might be a few little bubbles in it, like that, because we lost some out of the lines, but it's going to clear. Okay, good. So we're pumping. While we're doing that, we're going to go to drive. We're going to go to first, second, drive, neutral, reverse, park, and just keep working the gears like that. We're watching for big bubbles. That isn't the big bubbles. So let it pump. You'll know it when you see it. This is all the fluid that was in the valve body, the torque converter, the lines, and the cooler up on the stack. We're cycling the gears to clear all of the passages in the valve body. Okay, nope, that isn't it. Getting close though. Okay, that's it right there. I'm going to shut off now. Okay, now we're going to add 6 more quarts to the transmission. I find this funnel works the best, better than those long transmission funnels. This is my own concoction, but it works perfect. That's one. Okay, that's 6 more. We're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to start the engine and cycle the shift lever up and down through the gears. We're going to start pumping. There it goes. Start cycling your gear shifter. There we go. Now we've got fluid coming. When you see the steady bubble stream like last time, that's when you shut it off. You see how dark that fluid is. About 18 quarts in the system. We drained theoretically 6, more in my case because of the pan size. Then we pumped 6 and another 6. And once we get the bubbles out, we'll be ready to hook it up and refill it the rest of the way with fresh fluid. We're watching for the repeat of the steady stream of bubbles. that fresh fluid we just put in is replacing what was in. I think we're there. Watch it for a second. Yep, steady stream of bubbles. Okay, that's it. Now all of the fluid, most of it, 90%, 99% of it, is out of the transmission and the lines and the cooler and the valve body. So now what we're going to do next is we're going to hook our transmission return line back up to the outbound side of the transmission cooler, and then we're going to fill the pan all the way back up, and then we'll run it, test run it a little, bring it up to temp, drive it a little bit, and then we'll check it and then fill accordingly. Okay, pinching that off and draining out what's left. Get that all drained out. Okay, I'll lay that in my tray. And now I'm going to go under and I'm going to wipe this down. I'm going to pull it all the way to the front, put it back on the tray, and then unhook it at the front of the trans. Okay, all I'm doing now is taking my clear line off. And opening my clamp back up big enough to accept the line that's going to go on there. Okay, and now I can undo this clear line. Maybe. So I say, don't put it on too far. You will not enjoy getting it back off. And unhook this. Make sure you got your clamp. I don't see. It's been in a bucket as a normal procedure. But that's our clean fluid there, so we don't want to lose too much of that. Clamp ain't open far enough. Okay. I swear, transmission service has to be one of the most horrible jobs because the fluid is just omnipresent on your hands and on the handles of your tools. And you know, it's just one of those jobs that's just kind of like, thank God it's only every 15,000. A lot of people don't, you know, some of the newer rigs and stuff, you don't have to ever change it, I guess. I don't really own anything that new, but I've heard tell that some of them don't even have a drain plug. It just astounds me. But on the Super Duty here, towing the big toy hauler with the motorcycle and all my gear in it, you know, and the truck's loaded and you're going to Sturgis or Daytona or someplace like that, you know, it's definitely hard service on the trans. So I have an edge, and I have the transmission fluid temp readable all the time on the edge so that I can see what my, you know, you don't want to run your trans any hotter than 225 ever, and I don't like it to get anywhere much over 200, so I really keep an eye on that, and I drive accordingly to keep the trans temp down. Transmission temperature and exhaust gas temperature. You know, the exhaust gas temperature, you don't want to run it any hotter than 1200, and that's red line. You know, you want to kind of be down around, I mean me anyway, I want to be down around no hotter and just for a short period than 1100. I mean, I don't usually have any trouble doing that, but if I cross over, you know, the Continental Divide or something, towing that toy hauler in the middle of August on my way to Sturgis, that sucker can get warm on you. So you got to really watch what you're doing. It's a strategy game, really, to keep your trans temp and your exhaust gas temperature at, you know, reasonable levels to where you don't burn something up. If you run your EGTs too hot, you'll smoke your exhaust valves, and then you won't have any compression, and you'll get hard start, no start. And if you smoke your transmission, I mean, that's self-explanatory why you don't want to do that. So there we are. That's all hooked up. I've cleaned everything good under here, and no drips or anything. And then I can check back on it later and make sure that nothing's leaking, but pretty sure there won't be. I'm just going to snug that clamp and this clamp a little bit. Check, you know, those two. And okay, so everything looks great there. We're all done under here. We just need to top off the pan now. I think it's going to check low. I'm going to start it and let it idle for a bit. Oh, that fresh fluid coursing through the transmission and all its lines and coolers. So I'm going to let it idle for a while I get my stuff cleaned up here. I've got my drain pan, my hose, and all of that. My waste oil's all packaged. It's ready to go. Gotta clean out my bucket, and then hopefully we'll be able to get some kind of an idea of how much more we need to add. Because of the extra capacity pan, I never know exactly how it's going to be. It says it holds 7 more quarts, so by rights 13 should fill it, but and I have just 8 in right now, so I'll be adding another bit to it here, probably another gallon or more. So that's how I keep track of my maintenance. I got next H pop service. It's at 156.25. next oil, next trans, next Raycore. That's the fuel filter, the Raycore down on the that I put on the frame rail. Next coolant change, next rotation, next coolant filter, and the next bypass filter, bypass oil filter. That's down on the frame rail too. So I have double filtration on everything: coolant, oil, trans, as well as fuel. So I got everything as double filtration on this truck. I got the AMSOIL bypass oil filter, the big one, down on the frame rail. Okay, y'all, here, this is what's inside the Magnefine. Of course, a lot of this crap now, since I just used the bandsaw to cut it open, is cuttings of plastic from the case. But I don't know if that's Delrin or what feels like Delrin. Anyway, there's a pleated filter, paper filter in here. I don't know the micron size of it, but it looks really clean. Throw that away. And then if you pull this little doodad out, there's the magnet that's in it, donut magnet. It's got some, you know, your kind of the same sort of stuff you find on the magnet in the pan. Now this one's been in here just 15,000. That's my interval, so that's how long it's been in there. But so it looks great. There's no chunks. It's always good to see. And you know, just the kind of the black, almost grease-like residue that you find on your magnets normally, just normal service. Very, very small, minute sized filings. And so, yeah, there you go. There's a transmission pan magnet now for you put in your transmission pan the next time you drop the pan. I think I got a couple or three of these down in the bottom of that new pan. So, never hurts. Oop, hold on. Click it or ticket. So not too bad of a job. It's just a trans fluid is just everywhere. You just gotta have your pans and everything all laid out. Keep a squirt bottle of Simple Green handy to catch the spots that hit the driveway, and you know, clean the oil off your hands and your wrenches and screwdrivers. But so yeah, not too bad. Too bad of a job. Good to go for another 15 thou, pulling the big toy hauler.